Started. Yes. Hello.
Woo.
Uh, woo. It's happened. Okay. Thank you. And welcome back to the third episode of the V Square with your favorite co-hosts, Vivek and Vidhika. I'm Vivek.
And I'm Vidhika, and we're getting up in numbers. Vivek had a hard time counting to 3 just now, so.
Ouch. My God. I didn't think you'd call me out in the first 12 seconds. Yes. I was not expecting that until maybe like a few minutes in. So thanks a lot. So yeah, we're very glad to be here. Thank you so much for everyone who listened to our first episode. And yes, we haven't released our second episode yet, but it's coming very soon. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. But you guys don't know what tonight is because this is going to air after that. But so fun stuff. But anyway, but sincerely, thanks for everyone who checked out. Vidhika, did you know we have like more than, I think it's like 140 views on the first video?
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
We're basically famous. I mean, this is nuts. Yeah.
Like we say in our call to action on the videos, like, comment, and subscribe and help us get to our first million. Okay. Yeah, we're well on our way. What did you say?
We dream big around here, clearly.
Yes, very big. Very big. But sincerely thanks to everyone who checked it out. You know what's really funny is like our YouTube video has like 140 something plays, and our audio only podcast on Spotify or Anchor or whatever has literally 3 plays, right? So shout out to everyone who's listening on YouTube, and if anyone wants to listen to this on your commute, please do get us, help us get to that million on the
Hey, it's okay.
on the
They just
audio
want to
too.
see our pretty faces. Nothing wrong with that. Go to YouTube. We don't
That's
mind.
correct. Emphasis on pretty. Yes. Look at this right here. I worked hard for this.
I know.
Yeah. No, I actually woke up like this. Anyway, so so that's all done. How are you doing this week, Vidhika? How are you? Just wanted to check in. How's it going?
Yeah. Well, I had some struggles trying to get this to work. Literally, we tried getting on this stream, and the color wheel of death came on. My computer started to overheat, and the fan was really loud. And I just waited for like literally the moment I got onto this. So, I've been having some technical difficulties this week. Probably has something to do with my 500 plus open tabs, which I will try to work on this weekend. My New Year's resolution, that was the only New Year's resolution I had and did not succeed at that. It's been a good week. It's been busy. I feel like it's been busy kind of in all realms. Like work has been really busy, social life has been busy, inner world has been busy, like all the things. So it's good. Just so I try not to do, I don't like the idea of like wearing busy as a badge of honor. It's actually something I try to avoid. But I have been feeling kind of like exhausted recently. So it's a good signal to myself that I need to like slow down, prioritize things a little bit better. I was very proud of myself. I canceled a dinner plan yesterday, which I know sounds like a weird thing to say. But because I usually pride myself on being, I'm reliable. If I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. But my friend made the mistake of like an hour before being like, hey, are we still on for dinner? And then I was like, I'm going to be really honest with her. And I was like, I committed. So yeah, we can go. But to be really honest, I'm super tired. I feel like I won't be the best company. I just want to like go to bed early. And she was really gracious about it. So I was proud for just like doing the whole, just make sure you're saying yes to yourself. But yeah, that's been my week. What about you, Vivek?
First of all, hell yeah. It's so awesome because we were in a salon together, I think like a few days ago, maybe this weekend. I can't even remember. Days are just but there was this, I brought up this idea of like courage being a lot of courage is about, like having the courage to possibly maybe disappoint somebody and say no by saying no. Right. So very cool. Also, I'm gonna say like I'm so not surprised that like you wear it as a badge of honor that you don't wear busy as a badge of honor.
Yes. Like I'm not afraid to rest is my badge of honor. Yes.
I fucking hate, sorry. I hate those
no cursing. Kids
people
might
who wear busy as a
we've
badge of
marked
honor.
the not
People
for
is your
kids
badge
on
of honor.
YouTube. Sorry, say that again.
No, I was gonna say like I hate those people who say busy is a badge of honor. Is your badge of honor. Like I feel like it's your vibe. Your whole vibe is like, guys, if you haven't checked out Vidhika's um Twitter profile, her pin tweet is literally 20 things I do to ruthlessly safeguard my mental health, right? So I'm so
Okay.
not
It
surprised.
was not that dramatic, okay? I posted it on Mental Health Awareness Day or something like that many years ago, and it's just reminders to myself. I don't follow them perfectly, but I try. It wasn't as dramatic as Vivek made it sound, and there
No,
weren't
no,
20,
it's
I
not
think there were like
dramatic. It's just
10.
a dramatic reading.
Okay.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, it makes sense that you wouldn't do that because it's in line with your whole, hey, mental health first, boundaries, like all that, like enlightened techie vibe that you have.
Enlightened techie. Wow,
Yeah.
okay. I don't know whether that's a compliment or an insult. I'll
No, it's
try
I think it's a I mean,
I
it's a
mean, on
description
Twitter,
first of
techie is
all.
kind of like an insult these days, right?
Really? Okay. I
I
mean
don't
it
take
as
it as
in,
one, but I know that it's often got that vibe.
well,
I
let's put
quite
it
like
this way.
my job, but yeah.
Conscious techie. You're very conscious of
Mm.
like how you could do your job better. Like your vibe is very much about like how can we make this ethical? How can we make this important? How can we put like how can we be more considerate and kind as a service? That's your
Yes.
vibe, almost. So I'm not
That's yeah,
surprised
I'll
at
take that
all.
as a compliment. That's a good vibe to have. I will take that. Maybe an oversell, but I'll take it. Thank you, Vivek.
Yeah. Speaking of oversells, that we have a lot to talk about there with titles. Like Vidhika thinks one of our titles is an oversell, and I'm like, no, it's totally not. It's not deceptive at all. But that's
I was a consultant for many years and, under promise, over deliver. That's the
oh,
way to go. So
yes, but not when titling something where if you go to our YouTube channel, it literally says our banner image is like we're just fucking around. So we should fuck around a little. IMO. But anyway, that's guys. This is mom and dad are talking offline. We're not going to air our dirty laundry here. I mean podcast mom and dad. Anyway, how am I doing? I am. By the way, the whole tabs thing, like, it's funny. Before we turned the mics on, Vidika was telling me, "Oh, I'm one of those obnoxious people who has 500 tabs open." I'm like, if that's obnoxious, we're all obnoxious. Oh my goodness! Like yeah, tab reduction. Like, I think you can get a big sense of my hoarder tendencies in real life by my digital hoarder tendencies from my tabs. Uh, anyway, how am I doing? I think also not that busy actually at work. It's just very busy up here. A lot of, like doing a lot of healing work,
Mm.
jumping on 4.5 hour Zoom calls about
Wow.
healing and book club after book club. Something our guest today will probably have a lot to say about.
I was
Um,
gonna say, talk about enlightened techie. I haven't read very many books in a little bit, but that's on my to-do list.
you haven't read Atomic Habits by James Clear in January? I'm kidding. I
I was
haven't.
gonna say that was like several years ago. Get with the program. Okay.
I mean, that's the whole LinkedIn vibe that you're trying to deride with the whole enlightened techie thing. And I'm so with you on that journey. Yeah, I'm
Wait, so
so
what
not.
else? You said you're really busy up here. Lots of book clubs.
I mean, busy up here means my anxiety meter is like working overtime. Yeah.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I'm working a lot on healing, doing some meditation, trying to do Carnatic music, a lot of
Mm.
prep work for this concert that I'm trying to do in like a few weeks. So
Oh.
yeah, just and a lot of anxiety surrounding that, honestly. So yeah,
Mm.
that's been on my mind. Otherwise, it's like it's good. It's been a pretty spacious week overall.
Nice.
Yeah.
I just realized I did yoga this morning, and that was actually I was very proud of myself. I think I like didn't think, how they tell you to like try to leave your worries behind. Don't think about your to-do list. At some point I found myself just like not thinking about anything, and that's very rare for me, so it was pretty cool. I was like, wow, enlightenment moment. So, maybe there's something to that enlightened techie stuff you're talking
I
about.
think I was picking up on something very, very topical and very real and very
Yeah.
present.
Hmm.
Yeah. But seriously, all jokes aside, like that's fucking sorry, that's really amazing. Like
We're allowed to curse, like literally our banner has
that's
it's fine.
true. However, I mean, these big YouTube channels, apparently what's happening is YouTube's cracking down a lot on cursing
Wait,
and people
what?
get
Did you just
demonetized.
compare us to a big YouTube channel? Because
Look,
is
we're
the
trying to get to our
140
first
views getting
million.
to your head, Vivek?
We're trying to get to our first million,
Okay.
Vidika. Like Get with the program, please.
Right.
No, but I was just gonna say, like, regardless of size and everything, it's just like a lot of people with big YouTube channels that are actually monetizing it and all that stuff. Those folks are they're saying like the big strikes nowadays are for cursing. Like, really? Cursing? So
Wow.
apparently that's a big deal nowadays. So I'm just trying to watch it a little more,
Mm.
you know? Yeah. So cool. So are you ready? Should we start? Let me see if I can invite my I'm gonna drop the invite to our guest today.
Yeah.
She's on
Go for
Telegram, by the way. Enlightened techie thing, right?
it. I'm not that enlightened. I just use WhatsApp, you know.
Hey, yes, that's the Daisy thing. Yeah. Okay, I've sent her the invite. So as we wait, any other, um, anything else? Did I say anything interesting?
Did you say anything interesting? Never.
Yeah. You want to
No.
dig into? Oh,
I have nothing to
ouch,
talk to you about. Why am I here?
ouch. Oh my
I am
god,
just kidding.
way too
Um,
real. Oh,
I had some really good Laotian food recently,
ooh.
so that was fun. And yeah, this is what goes through my head. What kind of food did I have?
Hey, no, that's
Um,
great. What is
yeah.
Laotian? Like, what is a Laotian dish?
You know, it's I would be lying if I said I knew in great detail, but there's a lot of overlap with like Thai dishes.
Hmm.
Um, and so my friend got this like it was like a fried chicken with sticky rice and something, and I ended up eating a bunch of that too. I got just like a chicken curry that was very good. And I got like, have you ever had a scallion pancake?
I don't think
Oh,
I've ever had scallions. Hmm.
what? Vivek. Okay, you have homework. You
Yes.
are missing out.
Okay.
But in any case, basically, I had something that's sort of like a scallion pancake, but it was in a cube
Yeah.
shape, which was interesting. So,
Hmm. I'm just chatting our guest to say, hey, because I don't get the read receipt. I'm like, please join when you see us. Okay. Okay. So I have homework, which has to do with eating a scallion pancake.
I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a scallion pancake, but I'm just surprised you've never
Scallions
had
at all?
scallions.
That's seafood of some kind, right?
No.
No. Oh, it is. No, it is. It's meat, right?
No way. Scallions?
Scallops. Okay. Sorry.
I was gonna
Scallions.
say,
Okay.
holy crap.
I've had scallions. Scallions is the onion thing. Scallops is the seafood thing. Oh, I keep getting
Yes,
those
scallops I
confused.
have not had either, and I have no desire to have, but scallions are good.
I love scallions. I love the green onion thing. Like
So
this,
much you love them so much that you forgot what they were called.
I
You forgot that
mistook
they
them
were
with something that, in all, on all, due respect, sounds almost the same as the other thing. Yes,
Oh my
very
god,
easily confusable.
this reminds
Yeah.
me of the time that my mom accidentally ordered this is so many years ago. I was vegetarian. My whole family, like my parents, were vegetarian and stuff. I mean, my mom's still a vegetarian, but she ordered pizza
Uh-huh.
with anchovies. She kept
Mm.
insisting on, they confirmed the order and she was like, yes, blah, 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 anchovies. And then we get pizza with dead fish on it. And, my parents were livid. They were like, oh my God, why would they do this? And it's because she kept saying anchovies, but she meant artichokes. And
Oh,
so, yeah, it happens.
it
Happens to the
really,
best of us.
really does, and I would hate for that mistake to happen with scallops and scallions. By the way,
Yeah.
I have to say my favorite part of your story was when you said this pizza showed up with dead fish on it. Yeah, that's weird, but not that weird. You know what would be really weird? If it was a live fish. I'm like, dead fish.
I
Yeah, I'm
don't think
glad it
that
was
would
dead fish.
transport well. The tip for the pizza guy would have to be like off the charts. That's
Yeah, no, no, I'm glad it was dead. It was not that weird. That's not the weird part.
yeah, I guess. But I mean, I have come to like seafood to some extent.
Hmm.
I love salmon nowadays, and I like some other fish. Still not brave enough. I still have no desire to try like the ones that you have to like be all tough and break apart, like crawfish, all that stuff. No, thank you. But yeah.
Okay, good. So we're two very unreformed, well, or corrupted ex-vegetarians.
Oh
I
wait,
like
you
that.
used to be a vegetarian?
It did used to be. Yes, that's great. Yeah,
Huh. How did
yeah.
I not know
Just
that?
South Indian vegetarian, North Indian vegetarian. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Enough fucking around, as they say. I'm gonna have to step in here into this delicious banter and ruin it. I'm kidding. Okay, so our guest is finally here. So we're gonna I'm just gonna read her Twitter bio, which is it's really an act of poetry. It's a piece of poetry. So her Twitter bio says, "Flower emoji, being, becoming, and belonging in love."
Dramatic readings of everything. Anyway, go on.
Vidhika, I'm kind of in the middle of something. Jeez. Anyway, I'm docking a couple co-host points on that. Okay, anyway. Flower emoji. Being, becoming, and belonging. In love. Handshake emoji. Everything is developmental. Everything is relational. Growing heart emoji. If that's not the most beautiful bio you guys have heard. Anyway, but no, in all seriousness, she's awesome. She's very, very smart. She works in tech, no more, but she's really, really interesting person to talk to, and we have a great backstory. But everyone, please welcome Jessica M Alonso.
Woo!
Ooh, you doing all right?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Jessica, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. We're running a real professional operation around here, as you can tell.
Yes.
Very legit.
I heard that there was no fucking around, and I was like, well, this is not what I agreed to. nobody put that in the terms.
No, that's actually an ironic joke, because if you go to our YouTube channel and look at the banner image, it literally says we're just fucking around.
Perfect. All on
Yeah.
the same page then. 100%.
We swear this wasn't planned.
No, it really wasn't.
I'm very happy to see you both. I wanted to say that.
Yeah, same. It's been like a while. I haven't seen you in a while. We've like micro caught up a couple times, but
Yeah.
haven't
really gotten into it as much as we have at other times.
And we're not coworkers anymore.
Oh.
So that's
No.
exciting, but we can dive into that later if you want.
Yeah, I was definitely going to ask about that because, yeah, also, Jessica, you and I haven't talked for years, for so long. Oh my God, it's been so long.
We talked quick math. No, not quick math. Can't do the math at all right now. It was
24 hours ago at book club. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
was
yes.
this a 4.5 hour discussion one or a different one?
We cut it short at 4 hours.
Apparently, these things have a way of evolving into their own non-book club things. But yes, but Jessica, so I was just going to start with asking you this very, very simple question. Okay, so your pinned tweet, by the way, everyone follow Jessica on Twitter. It's Jessica M Alonso. But I was just going to ask you, what is this? So your pinned tweet, I'm just going to read it. It says, the word longevity is weird because it has a single G that gets pronounced both ways G's can be pronounced at once.
Yeah.
And this is a very popular tweet. And it's popular. And I never understood it because I say longevity and it only has longevity in it. I don't say longevity or longevity either. What did you mean by the tweet?
We were debating this before you got here.
Yes.
So
please explain it to us.
Somebody actually challenged me on this on Twitter once. And so when I looked it up and I played like a few different pronunciations of it, because I say it longevity, which it has the g and then it has the jevity as like a merged sound. And depending on which like pronunciation guide you look at and which, recording you hear, it seems like this is, I think like the Cambridge one says it this way or something. And, but you will hear some that say like longevity, just like that. But then I don't know, I heard this and I hear it in a lot of people's, in a lot of people's speech. And I don't know. I think I often like, one of the ways my head works is it like has words written out, like spelled out. I was really good at spelling and like my brain's like spelling words often. And I heard someone say it that way. And I see like longevity and I was like, wait a minute, like that G's like double dipping. And then we have these other, like, to me, it sounds the same as the word suggest, which actually has 2 G's. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be the biggest one for me.
That is that is going to stick in my head.
Yeah.
So when I first moved to the US and I got my first job, like that's what I first noticed of like my boss would be like, he's from the Midwest. He would always be like, I have another suggestion. What is that? Suggestion? No, it's a suggestion. Oh, okay. So now I get it. Okay. So you mean longevity.
Yeah, that's how I say it. That's how I must have heard it said. And I definitely hear more now that I have had my attention called to it by people who disagreed with me. I hear more, oh, yeah, that's a longevity, just like longevity. And then, but I still hear my way of saying it out there in the world. And I was like, yep, there's one. So I didn't imagine that. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. That's awesome. I'm so I'm so glad you explained that, because I was like, wait, do some people say longevity? Like, I was like, what is it? So I'm so glad I have some clarity now. But I was also gonna say, so I met. It's funny, the three of us have. So I met both of you in the same place, which is Vidhika's amazing friendship salon at the II, right?
Mm.
In 2021, maybe 2020. I don't even remember.
I
But
think it might have been 20. Actually, no, you're right.
If
No,
I was there, it was 2021.
2021.
gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a very clear timeline of my II experience.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. But yeah, so I think I met you guys there, and it was funny because like everybody was telling stories about friendship origin stories and stuff like that. It's funny that my origin story of friendship with both of you is the same II salon. But I was curious, how did you guys know each other before that? Because I think there was a
Jessica, I'll
story
let you
there.
tell the story.
You want me to tell the story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. I had started like tweeting more, as one does in a pandemic when they are living by themselves and like don't have enough people to talk to and all of that. And at the time, I remember I was tweeting a lot about software and design and like, especially like, I don't like the way this term has been co-opted, but like humane design, humane technology. Like now it's all like TM, like that sort of thing. But just about like what the relationship between like humans and software and design and humans and all of that is. And Vidhika was doing the same out there in Twitter land. And somehow our paths crossed and I started seeing her more. And we started kind of like vibing off each other's like tech design style. And then eventually I think we started DMing. I don't remember if there just like a, hey, I like love what you're writing about all the time. I really like agree with you about all these things. And somewhere in our first DM conversation, we realized that we worked for the same company, like, but neither of us had it listed. Neither of us talked about it on Twitter, like where we worked or any of the specifics of our jobs. So that was a really weird, like small world. I immediately went over to Slack and found her there. I was like, "Ha, there you are."
Both places. Gotcha.
Found you. Here we are. Like and that was I think that was like the thing that's like, oh, this is just too cool, let's get on a video call sometime. And we talked like a long time, like multiple pushing back the end of our conversations. And yeah, you would never believe it, I'm sure.
And I was gonna say it's impossible to tell like Jessica and I that we could talk. Like, no way.
Wait, why?
We're the quietest people you know, Vivek.
Somehow I have a feeling I know the like flavor of talking that you two do between the two of you that would end up with like, oh, let's record this and like do it all the time or do it more, because I can totally see I have like very long conversations with both of you.
You know what's kind of funny about that, Jessica, is Vivek and I only have spoken once. We only spoke once before starting this thing.
Oh, that's fun.
So it was literally just, I think we just are on like, a lot of mutual friends and stuff on Twitter. But yeah, like when that occurred to me too, I was like, I've actually not talked to Vivek very much. So it's kind of wild that we're just like, all right, well, we're going to co-host this thing with this kind of like ambient friend, but we kind of became friends in my salon a little bit.
What was that?
We kind of became friends in my salon. Everybody was a friend.
Yeah, we definitely did. And I was gonna say, like, I think you and I have talked, but we hadn't had these like. I think our first conversation was definitely, it broke the 2-hour barrier easily. But I think your laptop died after that, and you were outdoors somehow in Virginia. Like, sorry, we can cut that part out if you're not comfortable with that. But you were outdoors in cold weather or something like that, and until your laptop died, and you're like, "Sorry, I should have known my laptop was gonna die." Bye. I'm like, okay.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I don't remember this.
Yeah.
Okay, this
It's just
sounds very
funny.
on brand for me because all my devices are always dying. I swear to God, like it's just it's the other day I was playing Jackbox TV. You know, you guys have played those Jackbox games. Anyway, there was one of the clues we were playing like Drawful, and somebody had drawn like something that looked kind of like a something was running out of battery, and somebody's guess was like Viveka's phone, and I was like, God, I have a reputation, and these are people that I met like a few months ago when I was like, oh God. So anyway, some things don't change, but sorry for like leaving you hanging, Vivek. The one
No, it's
time my
okay. It was
laptop
great.
died, you know, it
No, it's
died
great.
again today actually. So just, you know, reliving all the things. Yeah.
That's literally what I was going to say. So, Jessica, we had some technical difficulties before we brought you on. And this was very much the technical difficulty.
I was,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
just
was a
funny.
technical
Great
difficulty.
synchronicity. But you know, one thing I just wanted to dig in, you know, getting a little bit serious here. Vidhika, after the salon, you kind of DM'd me saying, hey, in the spirit of our salon, because one thing we discussed in the salon was like going first, you know, like putting yourself out there, reaching out. That word reaching out, so common, but like, you know, going first really. And you DM me and you were like, hey, in the spirit of the salon, I'd love to, you know, chat sometime or whatever. I was, and who, so you guys stalked on DM. So the backstory to this question is basically that I am very comfortable in person, you know, like socially, not socially awkward at all. But online, I pretty socially awkward. I'm like terrified to DM people, go first, you know, that's like kind of like, I'm very, because there's so much lack of context. So how did you guys start talking? Like, how does that look like, just becoming friends on DM? Maybe that's a super simplistic question, but what do you say? Like, what
Which
did
one
you
did I
say?
put it first? I don't know.
I
Do you remember?
think I'm
I
trying to,
did, but
I'm actually like looking back at,
really? Oh my gosh, yeah. Let's just roll the tape and see how this played out.
so I just looked up my conversation with Vivek, how I started that one. And okay, God damn it. I'd found it and then I clicked out of it. Okay, I found it again.
Humane design,
I literally
folks.
just said, hey
Do
Vivek, it was great meeting you yesterday. Thanks so much for attending my salon and helping create such a fun, open vibe. I couldn't have asked for a better group. I love the dynamic that our mix of personalities brought to bear. And then you had encouraged me, I remember, on like hosting the series. You kept saying like, you should do more of these. And so I thanked you for that. And then I said, after you suggested that, I received a couple messages reinforcing the desire for a series. I'm definitely going to take that as fuel to plan something concrete. Appreciate the support. And then I said, in the spirit of yesterday's salon and practicing what I preach, yeah, I said we should do a Zoom chat one of these days if you're up for it.
Yeah.
And then I guess that's when we did our Zoom chat. And then I don't think we Zoom chatted after that until this thing started, until this podcast started.
Right. Yeah,
which
exactly.
is kind of funny to me.
But how about you two?
Our conversation, Jessica, let me see.
I imagine I said something about like loving the stuff you write and like just really agreeing with a lot of your point of view. If I said anything secret, I don't think I would.
I don't think, no, I remember it. I remember it vaguely, but I found the actual DM. Are you okay with me reading it, Jessica?
Yeah, that sounds cute.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you were looking for help at the time.
That's right. Oh.
Yeah. So Jessica asks me, hey, Vidhika, quick question. Do you have a design job currently? If you care to let me know. I'm looking for someone to do contract design work with a possible future full-time commitment when the time is right. Now, this is really funny because we didn't know we worked together.
Yes.
So she was trying to recruit me while we were in the same company. And she was just like, if you're interested in that sort of thing, I'd love to give some of your work a look over. And then I just told, I said, like, thanks for reaching out. Like, looks like our interests overlap quite a bit, especially in the ethical tech space, et cetera, et cetera. And then I told her that I had a full-time job and I told her what I did. And then she's like, I'm also there. And so we were like, what? No way. And then we talked about the fact that we worked together, and then she slacked me. And then we continued talking, and then we jumped on Zoom calls, and then would always go over time. And that's
interesting.
I think the story is new to you, Vivek, right? You didn't,
I had no idea. Well, I heard some part of the story in the salon, and I incorrectly remembered it before we started recording anything today. But I had no idea it was on DM. I thought there was some something else. I can't even remember. But yeah, very interesting. Like I think in this case, that like your DM, Jessica, would be much easier for me to send if I was actually looking for
Mhm.
design work. Like, I have a reason. Jeez, I'm not like exposing my heart to the world. Uh, right? It's like it's not me, it's the work, guys. So how
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you guys do this a lot? Like
Yeah,
DM
I
people that you
do.
like on Twitter?
Yeah, I think so to me, I think it's always free to just like tell someone you think they're great. Like in whatever terms you feel it, just like, hey, you're great. Like, if that's that, oh my gosh, this is so funny, or I just like, wow, you really like wrote that well. I'm saying it like I talk like a total dork, but it's not like that. But I always just think that's free, and it's like I'm not asking them for anything. I'm
Mhm.
not like coming and saying, please, like let's be friends and
Yeah.
complete me in this way and like save me somehow. Like, and that makes it easier. Not saying you do, but I'm saying like there's
Yeah, that's a very specific example, Jessica. I was come
no,
be
but
friends and save me somehow. Very specific
I
example, I gotta say.
I know people have a lot of different energies that come off of them. Not you, not anyone here. This is the thing that there's a range from I'm just like expressing how I feel when I see you on the timeline or whatever,
Mhm.
first to like I have constructed a parasocial idea of the friendship we are about to spark with that like completely rides on the back of how you receive this message.
Hmm.
don't don't go over there. That's you don't need to go over there. You're not. That's like
Yeah.
nobody needs to pedestalize anybody to that effect. Like it's somewhere in the middle, and there are certain asks that we feel like more comfortable making, right? Like a professional thing, or it's like there's a compliment involved in like, hey, I'm really curious about your work. So you can have like those sort of requests, and those can be kind of nice to like chat about or whatever. But yeah, but I always think it's just free to compliment people. Like it's not in the way that like somebody swiping through a bunch of people on a dating app has to like find a nice thing to
Mm.
say about you and then like try to make it fit like, oh, I got this from your profile and I like dolled it up so it would feel personal. No, like if you're moved by a person to want to tell them something about how you feel when you like read what they write, that's you can say it. Like you can let that come across because it's real. Like you were really like moved to want to share that. And I think that's generally the thing. Like you can tell when somebody's like trying to find a reason, you
Mhm.
know? Um,
They're almost retrofitting it. Like they're
yeah,
almost like they've decided on their end goal and
yes,
they're like, oh, I have to figure out a way to get to that. Maybe a
it's a
compliment will
move.
do the trick. It
Yeah,
feels too calculated, right? Whereas
totally.
I think what you're describing is very much like, and that we talked about this actually, I think at the salon, but like there's something different to just putting something out in the world and having like no expectation of a specific outcome. Like you might have a hope, right? You might be like, oh, this person's really cool. I'd love to be their friend. But it's
Mhm.
very different from like holding, a gun to someone's head, like you got to be my friend because I gave you this compliment, or you got to date me because I said this nice thing to you, right? And so I think when you put it out there with like no expectation, and especially when you give people an out, right? That's what we talked a bunch about is like giving people an out, like saying, like Jessica, even you did that when you asked about the professional thing. You even said like if you care to share or whatever. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't like a you have to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm big on like say nice things to people's faces. I feel like it's a little easier sometimes online. Admittedly, I don't do it. I actually think I do it more in person. Like just recently I
I
went to
was gonna
this.
say the same thing. Yeah.
Mm.
It seems way easier in person to say something to somebody's face
Yeah.
than where like DM somebody something nice about them. I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm either hitting on them or I want something from them or
Mm,
I don't know, like maybe like I have some agenda like this thing. Oh, I've
Mhm.
already pre thought in my head that they're friends. Like all that,
mhm,
like I don't worry about any of that in person. Like it's
Mhm.
so natural because they can look at my face and it's pretty clear. Like there's so much context and tone and all that stuff. But text, it just feels like, ah,
Mhm.
where's everything else? It's just text right here. Like there's so many ways to. I also like to joke around a lot and just be funny, which you need a little bit of like tone and
mm,
context. It just feels so much safer to do in person. So
Mm.
you were saying, Vidika, like it's so much easier to but mid-sentence you realize that it was easier to do in person. I don't know where you land on that finally, but to me it seems so much easier to say something nice in person where it can't be misinterpreted,
I mean,
either way.
I think there's like different dimensions of that, right? Because like I feel like, so the thing I just thought of is like recently I was at this like coffee shop and I liked this girl's boots a lot, and so I just like I tapped her. I felt a little weird going up to her and being like tap tap, but then I think she was a little caught off guard. But then when I told her I loved her boots, because I did, we talked. She told me the backstory, where she bought them. We talked for 5 minutes. There was nothing more to it. We didn't exchange numbers. We didn't become best friends. We just had a nice interaction. I made her day, I think. And I made my day that she was so happy. Like the smile on that girl's face was huge when I said that, right? And after that, we just went about our different ways. We like got our coffees. I had to leave, so I left. And it was nice. I think the part that feels difficult in person is in settings where, in that setting, like it's not common that I will like interrupt someone. Like I don't want to be interruptive. And so in that moment, I actually like, she was turned the other way. So I literally had to get her attention by touching her. And so that was a thing that I felt a little bit like, okay, well, I'm like not really intimidating looking, hopefully. And I'll just say this thing that it's going to be a nice thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she would I think very few people don't like compliments. Like I don't know anyone who doesn't like compliments. Not everyone takes them well, which is a whole different thing. Right.
Yeah.
But so I think that part is a little harder, is if it's interruptive. But in online, at least for me, what's harder, it's not saying the nice thing. It's this is gonna sound weird, but like at work, I have no problem. I will Slack people all the time. Like literally, I'll hear someone present something. I've never talked to them in my life, and I think they did a good job, and I will just message them and be like, "You're a really good presenter." I've done this so many times, and people love it. I hesitate a little bit more on Twitter. And I think some of it's this sense of like, I feel like there's no shared context besides we're both on Twitter. And so I feel like I need to start a certain way. I'm like, how do I start the thing? Sometimes that stresses me out. It's like, what should the first message be? And you know what's so funny? I just read our first messages sort of to each other, right? And it feels like there's something like, if this actually blossoms into a friendship or something, the first message might have some weight. So I think that's what like, I think I sometimes don't know how to start it. And so then I just like, I'm like, oh, I have to write this really nice, perfect thing. I'll come back and do it later. And then I don't. So that's how I feel about it. But I'm curious, Jessica and Vivek, what your thoughts are.
So I was thinking about the like potential of being misunderstood thing. And I kind of have this feeling that's like, they're going to think I want something. Well, they might think that for a minute, but then I'm not going to ask for anything. So, okay, that, that'll bear out that I'm not. Like, I just am like, I'm saying this. And then if I 3 messages later, I'm like, by the way, I have a thing. Then
my MLM.
Yeah, so they might think like, oh, maybe she wants something. Maybe, oh, this is nice, but maybe this is like, I don't know, but then it won't turn out that way because I'm not gonna do either of those things. Like I'm not gonna try to like use it for like a clumsy ask, like, I haven't constructed like big hopes and dreams with like this person. I think a big part of that also is like knowing that even if you do like feel like, oh, this person's really cool, I'd really love to connect with them, you still don't know what your like getting along would look like with them until you start doing it. And so you don't actually know like if you would have a good thing together. There's a little bit more like of people in that case feel more like collecting baseball cards or something. Like it's like, oh, I want to like get that person in my friends. And it's like, okay, but like there's a dual compatibility thing that is going on in friendship. And like you can open that door, and if they're receptive, maybe they'll like ping back and you can start like, going back and forth with each other. I guess like there's another thing like that where it's like, if I'm messaging a guy and I'm like, oh, if he thinks like this means I'm interested in him, like, is this going to do that? And there's a similar thing, which is like, well, if it starts going that direction of like flirtation or like that, and I'm not trying to flirt with him, I will just not flirt with him. And then like, it will, like kind of like allowing the misunderstanding to exist potentially, I guess, and like cross that bridge when you come to it, if you come to it. But as long as I'm still kind of like communicating from a place that's grounded in how I feel about them, grounded about how I feel about like what it means to reach out to people in general randomly. Like I'm generally not going to like find myself in much hot water for the most part. You know, it's and I don't have enough feelings caught up in it to get like my feelings really hurt, because in the end of the day, me and this person don't really know each other yet. They could like not like me some way based on my tweets, and it's like, yeah, well, it's my tweets. Like, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, and I do think it's just fun to like reach out to people and kind of like, there's also I have a very like, there's a sense of seeing people around that happens on like Twitter, which I think which definitely happened at the II. And that was like the feeling I had, where there are people that you either like both reply into the same threads a couple times, or you see them, they see you, you like each other's stuff sometimes, and you like, you know, it's happened enough that you're like aware of each other's existence and probably like roughly aware of something you could connect around, or that you kind of like vibe on together. And to me, that like sending them oh, hey, like here's a question about this post of yours, or oh, hey, I like really love the way you said this. It feels like it's just like, oh, I just want to like have a little private back, like whisper to you that like, hey, this is rad, you know, or whatever. You know, it doesn't feel like I'm saying it to a stranger. And if they don't like read it or like make it big and important, like, well, that's fine. You know, it's kind of like a reply, but not one I just didn't care to like publish to everybody.
It's kind of like an ambient intimacy, you know. It's like you crossed paths on the Twitter sphere and like Twitter sphere. How do you say that?
Twitter sphere.
Twitter sphere. In any case,
so the way you say longevity is no. I'm kidding. Go ahead. Twitter's sphere. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think there's this whole idea of, anyway, this idea of ambient intimacy, you know, calls to mind. It's basically shared context that's happening. That's so much easier. The moment you've seen people around and stuff like that, yeah, absolutely. There's a relaxation that happens. Where I think the problem is that if the misunderstanding, like, there's no problem really with allowing the misunderstanding to be. It's basically that if you get misunderstood in your first message, then it's not going to go anywhere. What if they don't respond? Like, you know, and if most people are okay with that, I have deep abandonment wounds and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
You better respond to reassure me that I have not been misunderstood. But anyway, I would love for this not to become another therapy session for me. So,
I swore off. I'm not therapizing. I'm not a therapist.
I have one thought on the not to go too deep into this abandonment side of things, but like one of the things that I also try to remember is that I don't know if you guys do this. I feel like everyone once in a while slips up, or maybe it's just me. But like sometimes when there could be a message that is really nice or really good, and because it's so good or because it's so nice, you procrastinate on responding. So it's not because you're like misunderstanding the person or trying to keep them at arm's length. Sometimes it's literally like, oh, this deserves an actually like well thought out response. I'm gonna come back to it when I have time, right? And we all know that how that goes. And so I also, I mean, I've done it enough times where like I am painfully embarrassed. Like there is this message that I can think of a couple, which I probably should go back to, but some of them are like literally years old, where someone sent me a really nice message and I'm so embarrassed that I never responded that like, as the years roll on by, I'm like, okay, well, it'd be very weird for me 3 years later to be like, hey, thanks so much for your really kind email. I know you sent it in 2020, but right, like that feels weird. But honestly, it probably wouldn't hurt. The fact that I still know, I think of them means like maybe I should just do it. And that person probably would be like, damn, it took her 3 years, but at least she got back to me, right? But I think that helps me a little bit too, is just this knowledge that like, when someone doesn't respond, it's not necessarily, yes, it could just be they did not want to respond to you. And it could just be that they forgot, you know?
Yeah, it's helpful to keep in mind like the nature of the like medium, I guess, that you don't know how different people relate to using their DMs at all. Like, do they check them? Do they read them? Do they reply to them? I don't know. Like, so I think it's one of these things where it's like, I could concoct like a lot of different possible outcomes of how a person might feel, either from receiving my message or for receiving my reply or not receiving my reply. And I could spend a lot of time gaming that out with no actual knowledge being acquired about the situation. And it's like, well, if I'm going to just like imagine a bunch of things, I could just imagine a different thing instead. Like, you know, if I'm going to play in the imaginal space of possibility, maybe I'll do it about something other than what, you know, what this other person sitting looking at their phone is thinking about right now.
Yeah. Or tell yourself the story that like, yeah, because you said if you're anyway just making up possibilities, and don't get me wrong, it's easier said than done because like my brain always goes to like worst case scenario first. But yeah, it's like you could tell yourself the story that there's something. I mean, unless you can genuinely tell like there's a reason, and usually we know, I think internally, if there is a reason that someone would respond negatively or poorly to what we're saying. But yeah, it could be just a perfectly benign reason, and we just have to believe that that's possible.
Yes, and like to Vivek's point, which I wouldn't downplay at all, because it like rejection is really hard. Like it can be like so painful. There's like
Actual rejection is even better. It's okay. I think misunderstood rejection is like even worse.
Yeah, I do think it's really common for people to have like a lot of wounding around being misunderstood. I think that's super common. And probably like super common in people that are like overrepresented on Twitter as well. Just gut sense wise. But like there is a way where also I always think about when people talk about approaching people for a date or DMing to just, you know, a first contact of any like sort, like a first initial meeting, like the stakes need to be like extremely low. There are billions of people. You don't get in deep with someone to the point where their opinion of you should be really, really meaningful until you're entangled with them somehow. And if you are entangling like your identity, your self-worth, your emotional well-being in like any person at the greeting stage, it's so distributed and it's so like fragilely in the hands of like randos. And it's like, you know, there's a way where you can say, okay, if the worst case scenario is like this person actively dislikes me, that's actually also okay somehow. Like, you know, it's like, yeah, we're not going to be friends. Yeah, we're not going to have a great conversation. But it doesn't, like, I wasn't going to get 100% of the people to like me. Like, there's no way to do that. Like, anytime I'm like just being myself, some amount of people are not going to be on board. And I'm going to just try to like find the other people instead, so I can like live at ease, but also in like connection with other people.
And it's kind of comforting in a really weird way that like, because I think there is truth to the idea that like you're not going to be for everyone. And I really truly think that's a good thing. Like many products that are very specific that have like crazy fan bases, like there are also people that don't like them. And that's what I mean. It's almost like the whole idea is like, you know, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, blah, blah. But like the concept of if you are genuinely someone that is for everyone, it's probably because you're not being true to yourself in some way, shape, or form. There's probably some amount of people pleasing going on. There's some sense of like this feeling like I need to be for everyone, which I don't think naturally is the case, right? And so I think it's almost like you're just you know, it's always a gamble, it's always a bet. But I think like as you it's almost like you can see it positively or you can see it negatively, right? Like if someone is like, you're not vibing with someone, you're not vibing with them, but that's like, okay, you know, then to stop investing energy and time in that person and then to move to the next one. And I think it's like a lot of what you were talking about, Jessica, is just like almost ascertaining, like not putting too much stock in someone way too early, because I actually think that's where problems start. That's where people start to then feel like you're demanding too much of them and they're like, oh, whoa, what are you doing? You know?
Yep. Yeah. You've like, because whatever image of them you have, you constructed in an environment that was not them interacting like energetically with you, you're going to come at them with a structure of like who they are that was formed in this one-sided way. and it feels imposing. Like it's like, oh, we're not discovering each other in a symmetrical way right now, and like finding our groove. You have cast me a certain way and started to like mentally interact with me in the abstract, and I wasn't there for it, you know, but you know what I mean? So there's something like constrictive or like
violation
boundary.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, here, let me show up with you, and then we'll like exchange and like see how it goes. And so sometimes you have that though. Sometimes you have somebody, I don't get this so much now, but this was like a thing, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, where I would get a message from somebody and it was like, oh, I'm like a whole character in your head. And we haven't met, like, you know, and you're interacting with me as though I am the thing that's in your head, as opposed to like, oh, I imagine you to be this way, and that's what makes me want to come find out about how you actually are. You know, it's like it's like it's leapfrogging the step where we like find how we might engage with each other. Yeah, I think that's kind of like what I think of as like a fundamental aspect of what a parasocial, like, I don't say that in like a way of like, don't talk to people you see on Twitter. I'm not like judging it. I think there's like a nature to that kind of interaction, that there's something like, oh, part of this social interaction happened without one of the parties there.
Yeah. It almost feels it almost feels like a violation, not a violation. That sounds really dramatic, but it almost feels like curiosity is like in my opinion, one of like the fundamental ingredients of a friendship, or at least a good one. And if you feel like you already know the person, or you act like you already know them really well when it's like far too early, it's not going to feel, that curiosity isn't going to show, because you're already acting like you know them and you own them, and you somehow have this like dynamic with them. So it's almost like they didn't get a chance to opt in. I think that's where, to me, that's the problem, is like, I mean, even with putting people on a pedestal and things like that, it's like, okay, so you decided this for me. I don't have a say in the matter, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It definitely gives me a feeling of like wanting a boundary, or at least, or like wanting like myself, like my sense of self to be present in the interaction, and not to be like, to not be interacted with as though I am the thing in their head. Like, no, I'm still a person here who is like, you don't know how I'm going to react to you. Like, wait and see, you know? Yeah, I feel that very much.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, there's so much here. There's this idea of like, you know, you want to say, there's an opt-in, right? There's the absence of an opt-in on the other side. But there's also like, it's also the nature of the opt-in. Maybe they do want to opt-in, but you're not discovering what you have together. But there's a projection of what you might have already had, you know, one-sided. So that's definitely a variable. One interesting that potential intention with that super low stakes thing on DMs, for example, is like, that's almost universally the rule, especially IRL, right? Super low stakes, super safe, super easy. Like, that's small talk is really honestly just that. It's just very, very low stakes, you know, inputs from both sides. But I think, you know, one interesting thing is, let's say you do want something from the person, right? Like an example here, a very topical one would be, let's say I was DMing somebody and I had a clear ask from them, but I didn't want them to like let's say I want them to come on my podcast, right? And we don't really have an existing relationship. And so I want them to not feel used. So I wouldn't just be like 2 lines. Hey, love your stuff. Want to come on my podcast and talk about it? Okay. Model 1. Model 2 is, hey, here's why I like your stuff. Da, da, da. I really did cool. And here's this very, very specific ask, right? And you know, on this date, this time, like, I'd love to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. So that's one way to do it. And then the third way, and I usually tend towards model 2, the little that I've done this, but model 3 would be, don't make the ask at all, right? Focus on having a relationship with a person. Like, hey, you know what, blah blah blah, how's it going, blah, 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 you know, and you just file it away. It's like, okay, if we become friends one day, I'll ask them. That's a third model, but even that feels so. One feels ick to me. Three also feels a little ick to me because I've
Disingenuous.
premeditated this thing.
Yeah, it's disingenuous.
I think there's a way you can do it genuinely, but I still think it's not the way I would. It's like, I'm not like, if I really do have an ask and it's maybe a little time bound, especially if it's time bound, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd rather be like, hey, you know what? I was thinking this all along, you know? I'd be like, no, 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 this is really what I'm thinking right now. I'd love to have you on. But for that, it's not low stakes by definition, because there are stakes. Like, hey, I like your stuff. This is why I like your stuff. Da, 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 da. You know, this is why I want to have you on my podcast. Here's the reason. And here's the ask, right? It's the lowest possible stakes I could get away with in that situation, but it's not low stakes at all. You know, it requires investment from them to read it, to respond to it, the emotional labor of saying thank you if they want to do that. But yeah, my job there is to just make it a very easy, like, if they wanted to put in zero effort in all of this, just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, they could. And I think when I DM'd Visa for this, yeah, Visa and I are mutuals, but still, like, we had to talk that much. When I did, I wrote this long ass message, right? Jessica, you too. Like, I mean, we know each other, but again, I wrote this long message about, like, hey, this is what we talk about. This is what would happen. This, you know, I think this is why we want to have you on the podcast. This is a very specific date and time. Like, this is how long we need from you. We can cut anything if you want, all this stuff. And all you had to do, like, yeah, sounds good. Okay, great. Yeah, that was my intention. And I'm glad that you felt safe enough to do that. I think Visa also was like, hey, that'd be great. Something like that. Like, okay, great. It worked. Okay. You know, yeah, just a thought I had. Like, there's that whole idea of low, you know, stakes go in relation with what you have in mind already. And sometimes you can be honest about the thing that you have, even if it's big.
I think sincerity is also like something that comes through, right? So I think, like, it's one thing if you're like, if you were to message Visa or message Jessica and be like, you know, propose them coming on the podcast or our experiment or whatever, and then make it seem like, oh, you know, we're going to get to 1 million, even if you don't say the 1 million followers thing, right? if you were to kind of pitch it, if you were to try to make it seem like it's something that would be good for them versus just like, hey, like, we think you're cool, we want to have you on, right? I think there's something really that comes through in that sincerity of like, hey, we just thought of you. We think you're cool. We'd love for you to join. We're not promising you fame and glory. We're just promising you a conversation, right?
Please.
Okay,
I think we are.
I misspoke.
I was gonna say, I was not told there would be no fucking around, and I was definitely told I'd get 1 million followers.
Yeah, please.
Promises were made.
I mean,
I hope that wasn't legally binding.
Is that, come on, we're gonna boost you onto, you know, the heavens. Like, sorry, no, we're you're gonna be flying high after this. This is gonna be the V square bump. One more interesting thing that I picked up on is this whole, you know, we were talking about what's somebody's baseline, right? There's this thing of relational baselines. It reminded me of this very funny joke in Curb Your Enthusiasm. There's this bit where Richard Lewis is dating this girl, and I think accidentally he calls her honey, and she's like, we're not there yet, right? And so they're all having lunch, and she's like, hey, I think I need to talk. We need to talk. And Richard's like, oh my God, it means we're going to break up. And Larry's like, I know what you did. You gave her a premature honey, you know? And then so she comes to the restaurant, and Larry's like, okay, just get her to the restaurant when Larry is there too. And just start calling everyone honey. You know, oh, so he starts telling the waitress, honey, can we have some more? Honey, one more. Honey, and then she sees that and she's like, no. I was just wondering when you could get together or whatever. So it's just really funny. It's because she noticed that his baseline, his honey baseline, if you will, was just, that was what he called her honey was just within baseline. It was nothing above the baseline. So this whole idea of like, you know, oh, if somebody's like, do you DM people all the time? Is this something you do, or is this a big deal for you? I think, Jessica, you were talking about that idea. So this whole idea of relational baselines came to me. And it's just funny because when I tweet, I DM'd this person this actually happened. I DM'd somebody and wrote this profound paragraph, not too long, but like, hey, really love this tweet or whatever. Blah blah blah. By the way, I'm Vivek. Rhymes with cake. Love to, whatever, all this stuff. Nice to meet you and everything. Their response was literally thumbs upping the first tweet. Nothing more. And I have no idea what that, like, I was like, oh my God, they hate me. Probably thought I was like extremely intrusive. But I honestly can't tell. Maybe that's part of their baseline. Maybe that's what they do with messages. Probably not.
That sounds like something my mom would do, and like I love my mom to death, but seriously, I can tell her like something super exciting that happened to me, and she'll just sometimes just like thumbs up it or be like, cool or okay. And I'm like, do you love me? Like, what is this? Can you pretend? In fact, recently I told her something recently, I guess it was a little bit ago, and I told her something, I don't even remember what it was, but it was not a good thing. It was something I was like upset about. And she like laughed emoji'd it. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, usually it's just a thumbs up, but this is not funny. I'm sad about it. Anyway. So I actually I had a feeling it was a mistake, but I called her out and she's like, oh, sorry, my hand slipped. I pressed the wrong one. And like, she's just a very in person, she's very different, but online. And when she responds to these things, she's the type of person that will respond to messages with a K. And it just that is her baseline, and it's the same for her kids, and it's the same for her clients, and it's how she interacts. But in person, it's a completely different interaction. So I think the relational baselines are important, and I think that's also why it can be really valuable to see like how do people talk to other people. Like Vivek, this has happened to the two of us recently, where we've seen a couple people have messaged both of us the same exact messages. It's fine, but it's just kind of funny, right? So we're like, okay, well, it just gives you a sense for like there was this one friend in college, a friend of mine, haven't spoken to her in a while, but she used to do this thing where she would send group, this is back when T9 texting was still a thing. She would send messages that seemed, do you not know what T9 texting is, Vivek? You gave me a look.
Yeah. Is it just the...
Oh, it's like when you had flip phones and you couldn't type, you didn't have a keyboard, right? And you had to
press 9 3 times for Z, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice anyway, word. And so she would send these like messages that sounded like they were they sounded specific. Like she'd be like, hey, do you want to meet up for lunch? I remember this one time she invited I didn't know it was all of us. She sent a message saying like, hey, do you want to meet up for lunch? And she and I worked like not that far from each other. But at the time this was my first job, and I was like, like leaving for lunch was a little bit like nerve-wracking. Like I had to make sure I was back in an hour because I used to be nervous about stuff like that. And I went anyway because I was like, yeah, I haven't seen her in a while. I go, and it turns out she's invited me, and there were like 5 of her high school friends there that I did not know. And I was just like, well, I guess I'm glad you invited me, but also I thought this was a one, I think several of them didn't know that, because she didn't send just a group message. She sent us this copy pasted individual messages. And so over time, I began to learn like, oh, when she sends a message, it's not probably just to me. So I would always have to clarify like, hey, who else is coming? And then she's like, oh no, just you and I. And I'd be like, oh, okay, in that case, I will be there. So, but most people I know don't do that. Most people, I don't default assume that. But for her, that became her baseline. Is like, okay, if I'm getting a text from her, there might be 10 other people that show up, and I have to be prepared for that,
Mm-hmm.
So. The eternal who all going to be there question. We use the word relational baseline, but this is like a great segue to ask Jessica about her bio, because I think I've kind of touched on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mean? Okay, so you have two things that say everything is developmental, and one that says everything is relational. Like to whatever detail you're comfortable in. Could you explain what that means?
I don't have it worded well is the thing. That one is the one that's there. Like developmental, I'll just like go
okay. How about everything's developmental? Yeah.
Don't let Vivek put you on the spot. Answer what you want.
Answer whatever you want.
Yeah. No, well, there was one thing that I was thinking, which is not what I mean by everything is relational, but there was something to the thing about somebody who comes in with like a formed character of who you are before they start interacting with you. It's that when you start interacting with someone, you are co-growing the relational like container that you two exist in together, which is about like what sort of things do we talk about? How do we respond to each other? Are we very like heady and mental and logical? Do we like talk on a more like emotional basis? Are we, you know, do we joke a lot? Like, you know, how serious are we? There's like, how much do we trust each other? How much do we have in common? Like, what am I comfortable sharing? Like, there's all this stuff. Like, does this person feel like they're generally on my side? Like, all of this stuff that kind of like percolates as you grow together. And then it's like, if you don't see that that's a thing that happens, you ask all these questions about how to behave with people in these like blanket terms that involves like not having awareness of the way a relational container is initiated and then develops. And sometimes it's like not having patience for that thing. So in a certain sense, everything is relational. Let me like table that for a minute for like until I've like written about it, I guess, more. But that there's a lot of relation, like edges between two people or things or concepts that are like invisible, and a lot of meaning and understanding and choice and stuff comes up from actually realizing it's there. That like, oh, it's not so much about this person and like their qualities and this person, their qualities. It's what happens in between them. It's like what happens when this energy in the state it's in this year, like meets with like this person's energy in the state it's in this year, right? Like, and it's like, oh, right now it's this. And that's why really interesting things can happen when people go apart and come back together. And, you know, there's something about like seeing the transparent edges between things as like load bearing. And like sometimes the thing people think they're talking about is just how they act. And they're skipping over like, no, there's a whole other object here that like exists that you could put a lot more of your focus on, like conceptually, and get to a lot cleaner like answers about how to exist in the world, which is like, oh, I get it. I need to kind of like have an intuitive or very like logical conscious sense of like what this relationship is, like where I'm at with this person. And things like reaching out first, proposing a new activity, like even bringing up a topic, like, you know, the first time you start to talk to somebody about something that's like tender and dear to you, there's a risk in it, right? But like the risk is not like there are stakes in that, like whether or not the person wants to go there with you will set some of the terms of that edge between like of what your relationship can be or will be or like is right now anyway, because I don't think all that is like one way and permanent or anything. I think these things are always shifting. But like that, something slipped away from me there, but but it's always like a shall we go here? Shall we interact this way? Shall we go to these sorts of things together? And you can propose things to people that are new to you too. Like, you know, you can be like, do you want to like go into this brand new space like together as like a pair or like, you know, as buddies who are going to like kind of be our little bit of safety net, but like we're both interested in like venturing into a new thing, and like that can become part of your friendship, or it can like become a really pivotal thing for one person. But, you know, there's something like if you were ever going to end up with a relationship growing between those two people, it was going to happen because somebody tried to move it. Somebody like said, shall we? Somebody said it first. Somebody said it a second time, and like maybe one person does the asking at first because that's just the vibe. And if that works for them, it works for them, you know. But if somebody's like, oh, what does it mean that I keep doing the asking? Well, if they keep saying yes, like you might be fine if you're okay with it. But if you feel like, oh, I need this person to like meet me halfway, okay, well, propose, shall we meet each other halfway? Like, you know, and see, like find out like the how much space exists in that relational container by kind of challenging it or trying to like move it to a new place or incorporate something new. And I think that's also like what flirting is. And like, it's like, do we want to like do this like plausible deniability game where we're into each other, or do we not? And that's why, even that, it's like you can like add a little bit of flirt and see what happens before you go all in on like, let's date, like let's go out. It's like you're finding out what the relationship is while you're like experiencing it.
It's kind of like what a lot of it is like every interaction is a recalibration, essentially, right?
Mhm.
It's like as you're moving along, you might be moving along a certain path, and you're almost like, if you're the ones going first and proposing something and the other person accepts, then it's like, okay, there was a double opt-in. We're going to go to the next step being like the next activity or the next conversation or the next whatever, right? Be this romantic, platonic, doesn't even matter. But I think where it becomes problematic is when one person is not kind of picking up on, right? Like it is not recalibrating. Like if there's a certain reaction to something, to a shall we, and you're not picking up on that and continuing on that path when it's obviously like not being reciprocated, then that's where it becomes problematic. So I think it's like, yeah, I think it's sort of like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And like you said, like at different times, people grow. And so like at different times, the same two people might be very different people. And that's why like afterwards, I mean, I actually actually a couple of weeks ago, I sort of like reunited with my high school best friend, which for me was like really like exciting because I guess it was like actually a little more than a month ago. But like we were like attached at the hip, super, super, super close in high school. I kind of joke that she was like the first boyfriend I had without a boyfriend. Like we used to stay on the phone all night and like talk, and it was adorable. And then we kind of like lost touch for many years. It wasn't like we fought. We just went to different schools and grew apart. And it turns out now she lives within walking distance of me. And so we just like have started going to yoga together. Like it's really cool, but it's a totally different relationship. Like we are no longer, we're not the same people that we used to be. We were friends when we were 14, 15. And a lot of time has passed. So we're not the same people. We still have that like that history. We still have that shared love for each other. Like and we did sort of in some ways pick back up. Like the first time I hung out with her, we talked for 5 hours. Right. And I'm not going to lie. Like I feel like I was more nervous than I would have been if I were going on a date. Like I was just like, oh, I hope this goes well. I hope this, like I told a bunch of friends about how I'm going to meet her. And like, it was like a thing, and it turned out to be great. But it was so different. And we had to, it's a new relationship now. We both had to accept that like, we are no longer each other's like first person we call, but that doesn't mean we don't have love for each other. It doesn't mean that we don't have like care and curiosity and all those other things. So yeah. So recalibration.
Yeah, totally. I love that. I love that. And it's super, super relatable. I had a dinner and drinks thing with my closest friend from college, and we had split up, grown apart for like over a decade. And we just met up a couple months ago, and it was so lovely. Like all this fondness is still there. I feel very fond of all of
fondness is a good word. Yeah.
All of the friends that I've had that we like grew close over time, whether or not we ever did this, whether or not there was a fight, I'm just very fond of all of them in my heart. And she's lovely. And it was just so nice to reconnect with her and to come back with everything we'd experienced while apart, and the stuff that's the same and the stuff that's different there's so much like richness to it. And I love that so much. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's funny when you said relational containers, right? Like I was thinking so much is contextual. Like everything's developmental, everything's relational, and everything is contextual. Yep. Like so many things, like they make sense in a context, right? Like that's why baselines are important, because hey, what's the context in which this honey is coming up, right? Is the context like, oh, it's just thrown around like candy, versus, oh my God, this is like literally me saying I love you. Even I love you. Is this something you say all the time, or is this something like that's something very,
Right.
very rare and pedestalized or something. Like everything's contextual, right? Including these relationships, connections within a DM container, within whatever, like a friendship in general. Yeah. So context seems to be really, really like crucial there.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, like, Jessica, you said the word shall we, right? Like that's a very powerful phrase, right? Shall we do this? Um, Reminds me actually of your salon, Vidhika, where we all met, where I met you guys, where I think Cassie, shout out to Cass Zawilski, I think I said her last name right, but she shared this talk about the power of an invitation, right?
Mhm.
Shall we is invitation, right?
Mhm.
It's all invitation. It's invitation after invitation. Like they're all subtle invitations. Flirting is an invitation. I mean, it's not an invitation. It's just thousands of micro invitations all the time, right? And it's the picking up of, first of all, it's the understanding of the language of invitation.
Mhm.
Is that's the beautiful dance of the whole thing, whether it's flirting or, I mean, even in just having a conversation, which is honestly why I index very heavily on that dance, and that's why IRL, it's like awesome. It's so oof, it's so fun. It's awesome, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I just have to learn how to do that in DMs. But I just thought what we're really talking about there is that invitation energy.
So
Um,
I do want to say that I don't think I have particularly good talking chemistry with anybody in DM really, except for like the few like standout cases. Mostly, and you could see even with Vidhika, like I'm like, let's take this out of Twitter DMs as soon as possible. I will see you on any of these other platforms. And then typically, if we have a good conversation going, I want to get on video or on the phone or something, because that's where I find like, yeah, we can like talk about some stuff. And yeah, so that's just to say, I don't know that everybody like DM game I think text just feels so, you could read it a million different ways. It's like
Thank
it's got
you.
nothing to it. Like this is where I never like took to the dating apps, because I was like, I don't know how to be excited to meet this person based off of these texts. Like that's a nice text, like I guess, but it doesn't do anything for me. So and you need to feel what it feels like to talk to someone. It feels what it feels like to like be around them, to like move. I don't know.
How they move through the world, right? Like
How
there's
do they move? Like this is why people actually fall in love with people they see like over and over again, like in context, because you see them move and you're like, oh, I didn't like expect myself to be attracted to this person, but after this many months of kind of just existing in the same space without like thinking too hard about whether or not we were going to be a thing, because I wasn't initially like, oh, they're so hot, or like in that, when that's the case, right? But then all of a sudden it like occurs to you that you're attracted to this person, and it's like you've seen them like around. You're like, oh,
Yes, you take your glasses off, and oh my God, she's the hottest. She's the girl next door. She's always been here. She's the boy next door. He's always been here. Oh my God, I had no idea it was you all along. Yes, totally.
it was you for the past couple months that I saw you around. Like it's like, and it's like, oh, I do like you. Who knew? That's cool. Like
familiarity breeds liking, right? Like
That's what I was gonna say.
it's repetition. Like you actually need some amount of proximity and like repetition to get to know people, to like know their vibe, to know their energy, to know how you interact with each other in different like cases. And this is where like there's something so like unrealistic about the way people are like supposed to date and fall in love, because I'm supposed to off of a couple photos and like a back and forth texting, like have already the investment. I mean, I'm not dating now. I'm partnered, but at the time when I was like looking at the dating apps and that was like what we were supposed to be doing, it was just like, I don't know how to have the desire to engage with this. It felt so the
flat.
same as meeting any random person, and like in terms of like how much to put hope in like something based off of a series of texts and a couple photos. but it does give you like opportunities to just be like, oh, I'm just going to go on a date with this person because they look kind of like this like TV character, and that's interesting. and like you have a fun time, but whether it's such a dice roll for whether or not that will turn out into actual romantic attraction or something. And you'd have to like be so bought in that you are going to see them multiple times. And it's like, so it's like asking the question at the wrong time of like whether or not you want to do the thing to like spend individual time together. I feel like it's so nice when you've like gotten to know somebody and you start spending individual time together because you just like both really want to, like you feel the pull. It's like, that's great. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me, so I'm currently like hiring for a role and going through lots of resumes, and like it's very
Vidhika, when you first said that, I was like, I was
hiring for a boyfriend.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Boy shopping in the
By the way,
oh, if only that were that easy, right? But no, I mean,
it is that easy. We're Indian. What is wrong with you?
Oh my God! Don't even get me started.
No,
but like, yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example, though, right? Is like looking at someone's bio data, or like looking at someone might look really, really good on paper, and like there's actually been an auntie that has like messaged me that's like sending, and I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Like my mom was like, oh, it's this person. You can ignore her if you want, and I was just like, okay, well, I guess I will, because she, you know, it's just. Basically what I was going to say about the resume thing is like everyone, it's not to say that there aren't, there are some that stand out, and, you know, some people may stand out more than others, but it's so different. Everything feels flat. There's just not a dimensionality to people when they're not, when you haven't seen how they speak, how they interact with you, right? Because you're the one that's going to have to like either work with them or date them or whatever. Obviously very different situations, but there's like, you can learn so much more in like a 30-minute conversation than all of the details written on paper, just because like there's one thing for, I think there's chemistry and there's compatibility, right? And you can figure out elements of that sometimes on paper, but you can't figure out like, you can't actually figure all of that out on paper. But that being said, going back to something that you guys were talking about in terms of like DMs, and if you can actually like, you know, communicate with people that way, I do actually find with some friends, I almost primarily talk to them via message, but I think it's all those people though are people I have met in person. So it's like they're friends where I almost, when they write a thing, I can imagine them like saying it. I know them well enough to like ascertain tone. Like most of my friends, at least people who talk to me often, today I used, I mean, this is not an uncommon one, right? But like I used a period in one of my messages to a friend, and like, it's not, I sometimes don't do it like super intentionally. Sometimes I think maybe when I'm annoyed, I do it, you know, but not even just a period. Sometimes just the way I word things. I've had friends pick up on it so fast and be like, are you annoyed with me? Like, or what's going on? You seem upset. And I'm like, what? And then I go back and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't include a pronoun, or I did, or there's something really tiny that I said. Like one of my friends, there's some messages I had sent to someone, and he was like looking at those messages and he was like, I mean, it's obvious you're annoyed. And I was like, really? What? It's that obvious? How do you know? And he was like, well, I mean, first of all, you could have said that. Like he had all of these like almost unspoken rules in his head for like, this is how you would have said it if you weren't annoyed. But the fact that you didn't say it that way, it's almost like there was a baseline there, right? When you talk to someone enough, there's a baseline for like, I know that this is what you would have said, but since you didn't, you're going off that track, something is amiss. So I think it is possible to like, kind of relate and build intimacy even just over a message. But I think it helps to have that like foundation of like, I know you, we've hung out, I can discern what you're feeling or what you mean even in your messages.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like with the messages thing, like when the biggest advantage of knowing somebody and being cool with them is you can ask if, hey, are you mad at me? And you know, that's a big benefit. Even if they can't discern anything, they can just ask,
That's true.
which is pretty cool. Also with messages, like I've actually had chemistry with messages, like DM chemistry.
Banter is a
I've
thing,
definitely had it. I've definitely had like a back and forth vibe, a lot of joking and stuff like that. But it's usually when I'm not the one initiating anything. Anyway, just an interesting note. But I also wanted to ask, shifting gears a little bit, because we touched on the role of like context, container, attention, right? It's the quality of attention that we're paying. My big fear when I DM somebody is like, are they going to pay the type of attention that I'm gearing this for, right? Like I don't like when we talk about this, low stakes and all that. It's basically we're not asking much of attentional resources, right? So one thing, so to prepare for this very important conversation, I was like going through. I text search both of your name. Sorry, I Twitter search like places that we've interacted on Twitter. One of our first interactions, Jessica, was you posted this from this fantastic article from Jasmine Wang about attention. And there's this quote where you literally pulled this quote out and you said, Weil is the person, Simone Weil, I believe. Weil believed that simple attention was required for moral attention, which was required for empathy, which was required for ethical action. Period. We are unable to act ethically towards that which we have not first attended to, right? And I thought that was really interesting, right? When I was thinking about this. And earlier you also said, when we're DMing, we don't know what this is going to be. So we're not able to know that until we first attend to it. So attention first, like curiosity first and all that stuff. And then we find out what it is, right? We have no idea what it is until we pay attention to it first. So I just wanted to ask you what does that mean to you? Like, what did that call up for you? This idea of like, I think we also talked about this earlier. Like, you don't know what the action is until, like, if your shame comes up or something else comes up, you want to pay attention first, and then you know what the emotion is telling you. You actually don't know. I found that very radical and very much against the way I look at things, though this really appealed to me. So if you want to talk more about that, I'd be all ears.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, attention is like the unit of safety and connection and survival to any like social creature, right? Like, okay, so I'll just say a couple free associations here. We live and die by, early on in our lives, we live and die by whether or not we have the right kind of attention from the right kind of beings. The young of our species who didn't seek out that attention, did not like get the attention, and did not go on to have like attention ambivalent young of their own that to spread that like quality. And when we're kids, I think that one of the big jobs of parents when they're raising young children is to help children scaffold and find the load-bearing, survival, safety-providing value of their own attention on themselves in certain forms, on their inner world, on their health and well-being, as opposed to places where, and that takes root by getting enough of the right kind of attention at important moments, and not too much of the wrong kind of attention or a stifling amount of attention, that there's a balance between being attended to versus being like oppressed with someone else's attention and energy and care, like, well-intentioned care. And actually, I remember also one thing I wrote somewhere was that I think that the feeling of belonging in a space, not fitting in, this is like a different thing, but belonging in a space, I believe has something to do with whether we feel in that space that we receive the quality and amount of attention we want to receive and give, and like let that our attention, like attention is given and our attention is received in like a nice dance of the way we want that to be. Because there's an ease to that. Like, I'm in this space, I'm not getting these kinds of attention, which I find scary, these kinds of attention, which I find like ick, or, and I'm getting enough of the kind of attention that makes me feel cozy, but not so much that I feel like I'm being like love bombed, or, you know, where it feels manipulative or something. And I don't feel like I'm being over controlled. And I don't feel a pull to like control or to over invest or to over manage, or like that I have to do a lot of work to keep like the attention right. There's some, and maybe that's not like belonging, but that's like what it feels like to be like at ease. And then ease is something that's like a fundamental component of belonging. Kids will, for a variety of reasons, like not get the right attention. And that sets us up to have a relationship to our own attention and to other people's attention. What it means to have our attention on ourselves. Or is that like selfish, indulgent? Is it, you know, is it time wasting? Is it, you know, evil, bad? Like anything could be evil, bad, right? What does it mean to want attention? Like, we know this, like that there's like a huge sentiment that people who want attention or do things to get attention, like there's something like bad and wrong about that, which I think is something that is a really common feeling amongst people who haven't had enough attention for themselves. It's like you're hogging the space. I don't have what I need, and now it really bothers me that someone else is like working to get the thing I want or something, right? Like, you're supposed to just like not need that, or you're supposed to leave enough for everybody, or like bunch of people starving for like the right quality of attention, or like the right quantity and quality of attention. And I think in either case, or depending on which version of not the right kind or amount of attention you got, you can be set up to try to like get the thing the rest of your life in one way or another, right? You can like be trying to get attention away from you. You can be trying to get attention onto you. And people will sometimes end up trying to make up for a lack of quality with quantity, right? Like, I'm going to be famous, but not known, and not vulnerable, and not pull anyone close, and receive the sort of attention that makes me feel like I might get rejected because they're going to notice things about me. Or you could try to make up for like a lack of quantity, of not enough different kinds of attention from different sources to like fill your cup, by like trying to monopolize somebody else's, a specific source of attention, right? And you could be like really jealous or really like restrictive and grabby to like, oh, I need this one person, and if they pull away from me, I'm like totally fucked, because like that's making me okay. Like, their attention on me is like live or die. So like there's something where it's just there's a that attention, acceptance, care, like that was life or death. Like, and it's so universal. Like it's one of those things that drives me nuts for us to like pathologize, because it's just like, yeah, literally everybody has this, you know? And like the people who had enough of the right thing to find that like source of connectedness where inner attention really does something for you, it really soothes like your system to know that you're looking out for it and paying attention to it, and your system isn't like crying out messages and they're trying to speak to you, but the only thing you know how to do is to give it to somebody else because you can't close the loop, and like your attention isn't like the right thing. Like, there's so many ways people get stuck with this, and it's but it's so common. But you can get like rooted, you know, you can get enough and you can like become more rooted, where your attention, like where you realize that love is like actually infinite. Attention is limited, but love is not. And you can have enough attention to just like get into the vibe of like, oh right, there's enough love to go around, especially if I don't like hoard my little pile and like you know, and not become a giver in generous with it.
Can you say more about that? How is love infinite but attention limited?
Well, so I think attention is limited by time. I think like there is a way that attention is linked to time that it just, you know, physically.
Right. That makes sense. How about the other part?
Well, I don't know how
What does that mean?
I don't know how to explain it if you haven't felt the thing, because there's a thing where it's like
it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's like you can.
Yeah, it doesn't take it. It's generative. It's not like
It's not like you use it up, right?
Yeah. Well, that part is understood, but I think the part that's not clear is like, wait, you can't have more love than you can have attention, can you? Like, you have to attend to something to love. Like we just talked about.
No. Yes.
The
Okay.
thing doesn't exist until we pay attention to it. Right? Like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, is it make a sound? Like, I don't know. If you didn't pay attention to something, is it even love? Like, I don't know.
Right. So
nothing exists outside our attention, does it?
So yeah, attention is a like necessary prerequisite to generate love, but that love is not like linear with attention. It's like it's a necessary prerequisite to love something. I'm already like this is false as it is, but to love something with real interaction with it requires attention, which requires time. But that like that love does not like scale in a time limited way.
That's right.
When you start generating it, right? So, and I think that there's love as like I want to separate like love from like care, like take care, provide care. That when I'm talking about like generating the energy of love in you and in your interactions, and even this is like not so much referring to a specific feeling, but more like an energy of a lot of like, you know, poets and musicians work a really long time to like define it. Like they're all trying to figure it out. But you know, that it's different than like, yeah, you clearly can't like provide care at an infinite scale, really. That's where there's a thing that that doesn't like sit in my worldview of trying to like save people, help people at a scale that does not involve actually knowing them or actually loving them, right? Like there's a lot of loving the abstract concept of humanity, loving the abstract concept of people or nations or whatever, and it's like, you know, but it's not loving people because it didn't come in close and actually know the people. It can't actually be familiar with their vulnerable needs because their vulnerable needs are within their like trust circles. And so to be able to provide certain types of care and help, you have to come in close enough to actually know people. And I think that to actually know people, like love is part of that. It has to do with like the curiosity thing too. It's like you can just like delight in coming to know somebody.
I think there's also like an element, my take on this too, to kind of build on what Jessica just said, is like I think time is the limiting factor, right, for attention, like you said. But I think with love, it's, for instance, like I imagine like if someone writes a love letter, they obviously had to attend to writing that letter once, right? But like every time you read it, you can feel love. Right. So they don't have to like give that attention over and over again to rewriting the thing. So it's almost like that can kind of, it's like a renewable resource in a way. So that's one example. I mean, even when someone is no longer in your life, right? Like you can still feel love for them. And at some point in time, there must have been attention to have created that love, hopefully, ideally. Because like if it's a prerequisite, right, that would have been necessary. But even if they're no longer in your life, doesn't mean that you cannot love them. Doesn't mean they cannot love you. Like even after someone dies, right? We often say that we hold love in our hearts for them because the love doesn't have to die just because the attention is no longer possible. You know, it's kind of like the way I think about it. It's sort of like planting a seed. Like once you've done that, it might keep bearing fruit for years and years to come, right? Like
Mhm.
initially you had to water the plant, et cetera, but over time, yeah.
Mhm.
So to me, there's a distinction there.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Love as enabled by attention, but not limited by it.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
There's something
You need
to like a felt sense knowing that there is like actually enough love to go around that makes the restrictive, like, I'm not talking about like romantic, like I'm not talking about a type of love, I'm talking about like
Are you talking about interpersonal love?
like I don't even think it's that. I think it's like life force, like
Got it.
connectedness,
Got
like
it.
reaching into life amongst life. Like it's yeah, there's an engagement with relating with life that is love in nature. And I just don't think there's like, oh, I'm all out of that, or like that there's not enough to go around. It's like it's here. Like people, I think that it's like people feel like not everybody, but there is a thing about like I haven't had enough yet, so I can't give mine out. Like I haven't received my fill. I didn't get my share yet, so I can't like emit love in like the free, generous way because like I'm worried that I'm gonna starve or something. And it's like if I think we can do something about that. You know, I think like if you have one who knows like, well, I can like have had part of my fill and radiate and receive, and there's enough for everybody, so I'm not grasping in a like, oh God, if this doesn't go right, I'm screwed sort of way. Like, you know, you can have like, you can rest in that, you know?
Yeah, like it's not a bank account, right? It kind of reminds me of this concept of, I remember this blew my mind when I first read it, but the idea that a lot of times we think like motivation, this is a little bit of a tangent, but motivation breeds action. And like, while that's true, right? If I'm feeling really motivated, maybe I'll go empty the dishwasher. But also sometimes it's kind of a loop where like action can also be motivating. So sometimes you don't feel motivated. It's easier said than done, don't get me wrong, but when you sometimes take a small action, you'll find like in the process of taking that action, you're like, actually, now that I've done the thing, I'm kind of motivated to continue, right? So you kind of have to like do the jump start and the cycle continues. And so in that sense, it's like, it's not a scarce resource. I mean, it's basically abundance mindset, right? And in a lot of ways, like love is abundant if it's this feeling of like fullness of heart or whatever you want to call it, which doesn't have to feel like it's limited to a person or people, right? Even just for the world. Like there's times where you're like, humanity is amazing. There's times where it doesn't feel that way. But there are times where it's just like, it feels like there is this sense of, I think that's a really good point, Jessica, that like, I think sometimes when people feel like they don't have a thing, that's because in a lot of ways our mental models are set up that way for so many things in life. It's like if we don't have the thing, we feel like we can't, of course we can't give it away because it feels tangible, right? But in this case, it isn't quite, I mean, it's almost like you have to have the belief and the willingness that you can, right? That's maybe a prerequisite for giving the love away.
Well, yeah, I think there is a way that like feeling yourself being a loving person, like generously, can come back and kind of like show you like, oh, of course love is abundant, because look how easy like it is to like just approach with love if you're in the space where you can do that. There's a like mirror image side to this, which is the importance of having boundaries. But where boundaries are what enable you to be generous, because you know that you're not going to give away anything you can't stand to lose.
Well, it's like, sustainability too, right? Like I think that's where boundaries really help, is like you might, if you don't have them, you might keep doing a thing, but then you might actually run out of like energy or attention or any of those resources.
Exploitative in a way, like your giving can, some like clever force can see it, that's, oh, this is we've found a font of like love here. I'm gonna like dry it out, like, and take as much as I want and not feed back in. And so there's something where you still need like the connection to your own like source of your own love to like to hold the boundary dear, to know that there's not a good reason to let your boundary completely dissolve, right? To not overextend yourself, to know that there's a cost to that could cut you off from being a loving person. And so there is like a self-love, a preservation of the sense of self that like the boundary contains, that says like, well, I want to be a loving person, but part of my doing that is I don't just want to give out love. I want to remain a loving person. I want to be able to move through the world as a person who can be generous with love and acceptance and things like that. And so I having clarity on like what is too much to give if I never get it back, right? Like, you know, that sort of thing about like loaning your friends money versus like gift your friends money or something like that, right? Like if you really value a relationship, don't lend someone something you couldn't afford to lose, or, you know, those sort of things. It's like, oh, I see, there's like a load bearing thing here about how much can I stand to lose. And now I can like just know that and like go out into the world and not be too worried about like, oh, did I show too much acceptance of this person? Well, they're not handing over the keys to my house, like, you know, so we're okay.
Yeah, it's almost like paying overdraft fees, right? Like if you don't have boundaries, you're constantly in overdraft mode. Like it's not, you can't, and it compounds, right? So you can't keep it up, basically. There's this definition of love that a friend of mine had shared a book with me that I really appreciated. And it's basically like love is wanting, like extending yourself to like want the growth of another person. And if you think about it, that I really like it, because like there's nothing in that definition about it's not contingent upon you receiving something per se, right? It's just a desire to want someone else's growth, which I don't know. I think it's really beautiful.
I love that. I've had a feeling lately that one of the ways I feel love for like my friends, my loved ones, is just taking joy in getting to be a witness, like, to their life, like whatever that is. Like, oh, I get to like wait and see what happens. And you know, and not presupposing what that will be, but just that you're excited to like see the journey and be along for it. And also I think there's like an honor in like doing that. Like I think everybody needs to be witnessed, like in their life, their experience, their pain, their joy. We really, part of our health like and wellness, I think, comes from having witness. And I think it's a great gift to bear witness for one another's lives. And I think there's like an honor to being trusted with those dear experiences.
100%.
You know, it's life. Like this is their life. Like this is their years. This is their growth. This is their path and journey. It's like, it's worth that. And we do that like for each other. And I think that's the whole game. That's part of it.
In a lot of ways, like that's what curiosity towards the people you care about is, right? It's a witnessing. It's a desire to be in the front row seat of their lives and knowing what's happening, even if you don't catch up every day, even if the witnessing is a little delayed, right? It may not be real time if you're watching the replay, but there's still something so precious about both witnessing and being witnessed. And I think that's where that reciprocity makes any friendship relationship good. I think if it's one-sided, and I think it's pretty easy to tell, like when someone doesn't care to kind of, and if you think about witnessing, right, that requires attention to witness someone, to be there in a way that like you are taking in what's happening.
There's something about a way of like being known. That's the thing that the little interaction that where I really get this is with certain people, where I'm talking to them about something that, of course, like I've thought about a lot and is very deeply meaningful to me about my life. And I say like a sentence about it. And there's something in the way I describe it where there's like 3 words at the end that mean a lot in my world, but that to most people, it might just be like, oh, that's just a detail or something. But there's something where when I say the sentence and those 3 words go in the ear of the other person and they say, oh, like where it's not just that they got the meaning of the thing, but they know what that means to me.
Yep.
And why I'm saying that and what I'm like pointing to and what's important about it. And it's like, oh my God, I don't have to do all the work of like,
you get me.
Construct my whole worldview of why those 3 words were the 3 words. I said, no, it's just, like the bandwidth of this conversation and connection is like higher because like, right, I'm talking to someone who knows me. I don't have to ground everything from that. Yeah.
They're witnessing you in, it's almost like they're witnessing you in HD, right? Like versus people who don't know you. I was just going to say it's all contextual. Like for someone who doesn't know us well, when they are hearing us talk about a thing, like because they may not know all the different ways the thing we just said connects to our interests or fears or deepest desires. And as that kind of like, as those foundations are built, that scaffold, all of that is kind of this like richer tapestry. All of a sudden it makes sense. It's like in context, it's like, oh my God, to her, this means, this isn't just like a random thing she saw at the store. This means XYZ thing, right? Which is like really cool. And in a way, not having to explain yourself all the time, not having to express like why X thing is important or why something is scary. Like that is also kind of a callback to previous witnessings, right? It's like, I've witnessed you in the past in many different ways, which brought me to it's almost like it's exponential. Like the future witness, what you witness in someone is only the depth continues to increase, which is just so cool. It's part of why like a lot of long-term friendships, or even friendships that maybe haven't existed for that long, but that have like a high frequency where you get this like, just this depth builds up. That's so cool because you're just like, the compounding is happening so fast. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A wealth of context is built up and it's compounding, and you have so much more. Like it reminds me of one of the somebody in some forum sometimes somewhere asked like, what are your favorite non-sexual ways to be intimate with someone? And one of my answers was like inside jokes.
Yeah.
Inside jokes is such a like this extremely intimate wink between 2 people, which is basically shared context, right? It's shared context, but it's this wealth that is built up. Like in a long-term relationship, people who've been joking with each other for like people who have been married for like 50 years, that's an amount of context and wealth and shared witness, and that is so precious, so beautiful. And I can't imagine. It's awesome. Also, there was, I think you said, you get me, right? When you witness, first of all, witnessing is about attention, right? So I might change my whole attention whore identification self-ID to witnessing whore self-ID to make it sound slightly better, because obviously that's the part of the
I want to
phrase.
rehabilitate the want for attention. I think it's fine.
No, I wear it proudly. There's nothing to be rehabilitated. I'm very proud of it.
I mean, at large, at least.
No, but I was gonna say, like, Vidhika, you said like you get me. Like it's almost like this whole you complete me business is almost, it's more precious to be got than to be completed. And maybe part of completion is like to be got, to be understood, to be it also reminds, another example that came to mind, it's kind of silly, but it makes sense. At Vibe Camp, right? Somebody tweeted that like, oh, I understood. Like, the reason I liked Vibe Camp was it felt like I didn't have to explain myself. It felt like I was already on I was starting on step 50 or step 100, and I didn't have to take 100 steps with somebody. They'd already taken that with me. We already had this shared context. We already had all this. So I could start there where I'm already at. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. There's one thing I was going to say there. I do think there are certain people who are really good at this somehow. Like there's something about this interaction being like, oh, my history is real to you. It's like part of this, right? You know that I have been through these things, or you know this about my background, or you know this, and you can like not just know that as a fact, but know that it has meaning to me, that it like that I developed out of it, like, you know, and that that's still in there somewhere, or that's like related. And I remember there was this one person who I actually had met, you know, a handful of times, kind of like a friend of a friend, but and we weren't close, and I don't even know if we'd ever had a one-on-one conversation before, really. And I was kind of starting this project, and I had a sense like that he would like have some good advice around something. And so we scheduled our first call together, and rather than it being about like just the advice was very straightforward. We got through that in like 5 minutes, but I ended up sharing more about like how I was like nervous, like a little bit more about you know, I'm not quite sure if I can like do this thing and have it work out, you know? And this person, they just pulled from like my history, from what they knew about me, the perfect like piece of motivation of just like knowing enough of my like story, or what they had heard about me from like our mutual friend, and like painted this whole rich and like not incorrect like view of like the perfect motivating thing to say, of being able to draw my attention to all the ways that the thing I am trying to do now is the same as something I had already done. And I was like blown away by somebody's ability to do that with as little as he had like to go off of. And I was like, what a gift. Like I could imagine being if you're friends with someone like that for like the long term, I just imagine that they'd get it, you know? And I think the feeling of being understood that way, to me, like it becomes very clear to think about its exact opposite, right? Because in this like I'm understood thing, the whole thing is, oh, I didn't have to say more. And this person's like abstract concepts in their head that I'm seeing them react to, it's like resonating with more meaning than what I just said in my words. The alternative is, no matter how much I add, I can't get understood. Like it's not happening. It's so frustrating. Like it's, for a lot of people, it's super triggering, right? Yeah. Like it's like I'm beating my head against the wall. There's nothing I can do to like facilitate feeling seen in this conversation. All I can do is feel like mildly less misunderstood, maybe, but I'm having to do so much work. And all that time you're having to like negotiate with something that's just like, well, that's just not me. That's not what I'm saying. Like I have to interact with this whole like wrong model and like try to guide it in the right direction. It's so tiring. Yeah. And there's something like relieving and restful just for like, oh, I said 3 words. And then they went, oh, and I'm like, right, you like get it. Okay, perfect. You know?
It's kind of the opposite of like the abundance of witness. It's like, it's feeling misunderstood when you keep trying to explain something to someone and you're like, okay, X person got it when I said it in a sentence, and they were able to tie together those disparate moments in which I've talked about this thing, and they have this mental model, they get me. And in this case, I'm trying and trying and trying, and just like, it's not working. Right. It's so frustrating. I also wanted to share, I've shared this on Twitter a bunch, so you two have probably already seen it, but when we were talking about like that wealth of kind of witnessing and all that, those experiences kind of building up, there's this quote about how like we were talking, you mentioned inside jokes, Vivek, right? And the reason inside jokes have so much value is because they mean something in that context. Mm-hmm. They don't really mean anything outside of that context, which is what makes them so special and so fun. So this quote is basically, the pleasure of remembering had been taken from me because there was no longer anyone to remember with. It felt like losing your co-rememberer meant losing the memory itself, as if the things we'd done were less real and important than they had been hours before. And I love that because it's basically speaking to this idea, you know, anytime like a friendship ends, a relationship ends, you lose someone, there can be this sense of like, this person got me. We had this abundance of shared memory. We'd witnessed each other in certain ways. And it can feel like that's really hard to like replace, because you're like, oh my God, all those inside jokes, like no one else gets that, right? Like that shared language that we've created together. Is it even, if this doesn't mean anything outside the context of this person, did it ever mean anything? It's the whole, if the tree falls, right? Like, yeah. Anyway, I just think it's really, it's amazing how much like meaning we ascribe to the witnessing.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think I'm going to say there's a lot of honor in bearing witness and in someone bearing witness for you. Just to pull that out, I think that's a great note to, I think we should do a time check. We should probably close soon, but that whole, I mean, there's something sacred about that, honestly. Like when I felt that a lot when I was doing generational trauma healing and stuff like that. A lot of that, I mean, you feel noble for having witnessed something, right? And it's a huge gift to be born witness too. But to do it also is like sitting. A lot of like death related practices are about bearing witness to somebody's life and bearing witness to their story and bearing witness together very often. And I don't know, it's just the inherent honor of that it's something you're rising to, and it's some of the best of what's available to us as human beings, to be called to that. I think it's just beautiful, very sacred.
Like when someone's vulnerable with us, they're allowing us, right, to bear witness to something deep within themselves. That part of why vulnerability often feels so sacred is because people aren't usually vulnerable with just anyone. Obviously there are exceptions, but many people will choose to be vulnerable with certain people. So it's almost like they are, you're being chosen for this privilege, for this honor. And yeah, it's like kind of cool and touching.
Yeah, and in love, there's this idea of like, I see you as you are, and I love you as you are. Like we sometimes forget how much the first phrase is important, right? I see you as you are is like 90% of the battle is that. Like if you can actually see me, I mean that's it's so precious. Yeah.
And it can also be scary, I think, for some people to be seen as they are, right?
100%. 100%. It's so common. It's people like it's one of those things, if you tap into it for real and really empathize, it's just heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. How many people like were taught through experience, through explicit, implicit means of just this blanket unworthiness, or that of contingency based on like, I was thinking about this about parents and children, like that there's this one just reality of time and like where people are at mentally it's inescapable to me somehow, that when you're born, from the time you're born until the time you start like dreaming about your future in any sort of terms that are going to kind of stick around or like be part of your path, your parents have already been dreaming about your being and your life and your potential future for longer than that. Like, they thought about your career long before you ever did, right? And so, and you can see how much that comes through, right? Like parents will be very attached to images that they have for their children, very specific things before they've met and before they've gotten to find out what this person's going to be like. And there's a lot of control and shame and reward and punishment that's used to try to like hone people toward an image that's not theirs, because it was like in place first. And I empathize that like one of the jobs of parents is to be able to grieve the difference and grieve whatever picture they had that was always a dream. Like it was never going to be that. That's not how this works, right? You don't carve a person out of clay into an image. They grow out of things, they grow into things, they are affected, they affect, like they have will, they have life force, they have personality, like, and there was something about the witness, the curiosity. The curiosity is actually the antidote. It's I actually don't know what this being is going to be. I know that as much as within my power, they're going to be safe, fed, loved, understood, like given affection. I'm going to try to see to those things that are my responsibility, and I'm going to try to support their growth. But I am also along for the ride to find out, like, as they find out. They get to surprise me, just like getting to know anybody else.
Yeah, it's a co-creation. This kind of comes back full circle to like what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Like when we feel like someone has a projection of us and that's who they want to be friends with or who they want to date, but they haven't actually taken the time to pay attention, to witness us in the ways that we need to be witnessed. So it kind of feels premature, right? And yeah, obviously I think the circumstances of that happening even earlier in childhood can be more grave, right? Because you carry that with you. But yeah, it is a similar flavor of not allowing them that opportunity to be witnessed, really.
Yeah, be open to discovering what this is going to turn into, whether it's a DM or whether it's your kid. Your kid is just another DM.
Yeah.
Understatement, overstatement of the year.
So everybody's going to birth some DMs now. They're in gestation at this moment. But there's a very clear tie here about how one of these things makes the other, right? Where does the attachment to the image of a certain relationship or interaction with literally a stranger, like where does that come from? Like there's a pattern of like presupposing a determined thing and then like make it happen, and if you didn't make it happen, like you're screwed. And it's like, well, none of that's a given. Like at any point in that like whole chain, you could introduce maybe, like, or maybe you're fine even if this person doesn't like you. Maybe maybe you're better off actually if this doesn't go somewhere. You don't know yet. I think curiosity has such a nice resonance in the attention and time thing, because there's also a patience to it. You have to kind of like wait and see and let things be uncertain and let things be let people feel the wrong way about a thing and trust that either this was going to resolve or it wasn't. Like, yeah.
That's lovely. Be open to uncertainty and be curious. What a great place to end. So, Jessica, thank you so much for being our guest. It was super fun to have you. We usually end the podcast with like, if there's anything you want to plug, or if there's a courage edge that you're thinking about that you want to share with us, or something you're curious about, floor is yours.
I'm unemployed. I am selling nothing. I am publishing nothing, like in any form right now. I am here asking for nothing right now. All my needs are in a good spot. Just take care of yourself, take care of each other. Lots of love.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Love that. What a place of abundance. I love that.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, thank you so much again, Jessica, for being with us. And
thank you. This was a lot of fun. I was just glad to get to chat, and even it feels like catching up. This feels very much like how we would just chat.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we did. We bore witness. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. And we will wrap the show with that and see you next time. Bye.
See ya.